Almost 2 years after the collapse of Terra, the $40 billion implosion, the biggest implosion in crypto, finally the SEC is bringing Terraform Labs and Terra co-founder Do Kwon to court. As it all kicked off day one at the courthouse down in the Southern District of New York, I was there in a courtroom that was stacked with a bunch of suits as the SEC lawyers were there and the defense attorneys on the Terraform and Do Kwon side were there in what is just a couple floors away from where SBF's trial also happened, where he was convicted. And this one, weirdly, not getting covered as much. So at Coinage, we're going to be doing daily recap videos, beginning with day one, all the action from inside the courtroom as we see fit to bring to you. And day one was pretty interesting. Day one featured the jury selection process, as well as opening statements from both the SEC and the joint opening statement from the defense attorneys representing both Terra and Do Kwon. And they went back and forth after they decided on a jury of 9 New Yorkers who will be deciding the fate of both Terraform and Do Kwon in this case. This is not a criminal trial, though, like we saw play out with SBF in that fraud trial. This is a civil fraud case brought by the SEC against Do Kwon and Terraform Labs. It was a little weird because it wasn't as heavy in press as a lot of the SBF trial was. In fact, there was basically room to sit, despite the fact that I showed up a little bit late at the courthouse. And off the jump, Judge Rakoff explained how this was all going to go in the 2 weeks he expects this trial to run. To start, they selected the jurors and both sides went back and forth. 6 women and 3 men were selected at first, including one guy who said he spent thousands of dollars on Bitcoin and Ethereum but never touched Terraform Labs. That guy was tossed. Interestingly, there was also a girl in her 30s who had said that she sat on a jury before in a case that was about someone who had counterfeit money on them, but the jury couldn't decide if there was enough intent to use that counterfeit money, so they didn't actually convict the guy. Unsurprisingly, that girl was tossed. Unclear which side tosses who in this process. You just know that the judge is dismissing potential jurors. Eventually, you did land on 6 women and 3 men who had never touched cryptocurrency before, all New Yorkers, and all going to be the ones deciding whether or not Terraform and Do Kwon are found culpable here. The jurors out of the 9, there's not a lot to report in terms of anyone standing out particularly, except for the last juror to be included, a man in his 40s, I think, who was wearing a New York Giants sweater. Judge Rakoff, who actually was cracking some pretty good jokes throughout this whole process, opined that the man must be sad because he's a Giants fan. Judge Rakoff shared that he's also a Giants fan. His joke was that, "I'm wearing black because I'm in mourning," and that joke kind of crushed in the courtroom. Everyone enjoyed that one, and I think probably it'll confuse the shit out of Korean press members who don't understand the intricacies of New York City sports. But that was one kind of joke that Judge Rakoff threw out there when he was trying to explain what the hell this jury is about to rule on and what they should expect over the course of the 2-week trial. Outside of that, there weren't any particular jurors that seemed to reveal anything that might sway how they could rule in this potentially. As I said, 6 women, 3 males. The 3 males, it was that divorcee who was wearing a giant sweater, another guy who has a girlfriend, and I don't think that's what the judge was asking for when he said, "What's your marital status?" And then another guy who's pending in a personal injury lawsuit. So those are the 3 males. The 6 females, again, mostly minorities in the way that they might rule here. Not sure that that has anything to do with what they might be thinking about this, but none of them, any experience in buying or selling cryptocurrencies. So unclear how that might play into what they decide in this fraud trial. And it really comes down to 2 prongs. The first prong is something that we already covered in our exclusive interview with Do Kwon from 2022 in the first interview that he ever did after the Terra collapse, which was mostly around what he knew and when. Similar to what happened in the SBF fraud trial, this is going to be on the SEC to prove and show the jury that Terraform and Do Kwon were aware of some of the things that they were saying were not in fact true to the public, including this idea that Chai, the sister payments company to Terra that Do Kwon had co-founded with his co-founder Daniel Shin, who is actually in Korea right now, was using the Terra blockchain for payments. The SEC claimed in their opening arguments that they will show at this trial, among testimonies from a few people who were attached to both Chai and Terra, that at no point did Chai actually use the Terra blockchain for payments in the way that Do Kwon and Terra had communicated to the public? That will be one key piece of this two-prong thesis from the SEC. The other second prong has to do with the way that Terra had marketed their stablecoin, UST. It was the stablecoin that was supposed to stay pegged to a dollar. The SEC claimed that they were basically hiding from the public the reasons as to why that was true up until it depegged from a dollar. That happened earlier on in the life cycle of Luna and UST. If you remember, there was an earlier depeg when UST dipped to, I think, as low as basically 69 cents or around there. And not too many people knew that behind the scenes, Jump Crypto, a crypto hedge fund, was buying up a bunch of UST after Terraform had contacted traders at Jump Crypto. And, you know, they were essentially the ones who were there to support UST back then. A lot of what Terra had said publicly was about the algorithm working as intended. And the SEC is going to try throughout the course of this trial to show that it was actually fraudulent behavior in the way that Terraform and Do Kwon had described that market event, that failure, and how UST was able to return to its $1 peg. Interestingly, though, those are two very different things than what almost everyone was saying about the Terra collapse. If you think back to what people said, there were claims that Do Kwon had embezzled all this money himself, that he had stolen user funds. It's important that the defense presented to the jury that this is not at all like that when it comes to how Terra operated, in that it never took custody of customers' money. It's not an FTX similar case. It's a blockchain. People were able to buy and sell these things as they wished, and it was all self-custody. There was, of course, the aspect of a 20% interest rate in the Terra savings protocol anchor. So it's going to be tricky, I think, to the defense to dig into this idea of how deep do they want to go without confusing the jury? How deep will the SEC go without confusing the jury? Because this is not as simple as the FTX SBF fraud case. Though, if you do compare the opening statements between what the SEC said and what the DOJ said in SBF's case, they are very much trying to use the same lines. The opening line from the SEC's opening arguments were almost exactly what we heard from the DOJ at SBF's trial, in that they said this is not a case about technology, this is a case about fraud. That's almost verbatim what we heard from prosecutors at SBF's trial. And they closed with the same line: this trial is not about the technology. So there is that from the SEC. On the flip side, the defense argument is very much what we heard from Do Kwon in our interview. Where do you draw the line between failure in an ambitious technology company trying to revolutionize finance, and where does that become fraud? The opening statement from the defense attorney there is saying Do Kwon did not lie about what Terra could do, and that's basically the thrust. Where the rubber meets the road in this case is whether or not the jury believes Do Kwon and Terraform Labs did lie about what Terra could do, or whether or not they didn't. And they also closed with the idea that failure does not equal fraud. So that's what's going to play out over the next 2 weeks. That was day one from the courtroom at the Southern District of New York. I'll continue to cover, as we both will here at Coinage, the updates around what's happening in this case. A lot of interesting testimony, including the current CEO of Terraform Labs, Chris Amani, set to take the stand, as well as former employees as well. But a lot of this reporting already out there, as we did almost 2 years ago, and in a follow-up exclusive with Do Kwon about who he is as a person and what is about to come out at trial. If you want to read all that, you can check out all of our reporting at coinage.media. That's day one from the courtroom. We'll continue to publish daily updates. Stay tuned for day two.